Welcome back to AP World History. This is chapter 26, and we're talking about the Ottoman Empire, Egypt, Sudan, talking about the Qin dynasty in China. Now, we talked about the fact that the Ottoman Empire is crumbling. It's often called the sick man of Europe. It tries to modernize with some success. The Egyptians under Muhammad Ali tried to industrialize and modernize the army, but since when he dies, he's pretty much a failure. There is some modernization of the armed forces. He's going to be replaced by Khedives, so these rulers after him, and most of them are inept. They don't rule very well. They attempt to build the Suez Canal, but this bankrupts the country. They call upon Great Britain to help them, and they will willingly because Great Britain will take control of the canal. Um, there are two camps within the Arab world, the Muslim world, one wanting to modernize, another faction believing that the West can only corrupt Islam and to throw the Westerners out. Muhammad Ahmed is going to become a leader in the Sudan area. He's going to fight the British. He's going to lead a holy war against the West to expel the foreigners from his nation. He has early success. Eventually, the British are able to bring him to heel, and his rebellion is crushed, and the British will have a firm control on Sudan and Egypt. And this is going to be a pattern repeated over and over again in Africa, where it essentially is just carved up. The only nation in Africa after the land grab, the imperialization, the colonization of Africa is Ethiopia. So Mahdi's army wins control of Sudan, but he's later defeated in 1896, and British control will be from that point on. This shows an aerial view of the Suez Canal. Not quite the engineering feat that the Panama Canal, because it's a little flatter here, but nonetheless, most of the work was done by hand. Get a shovel, and eventually they will get the aid of the British, and they will finish the canal. And it's going to cut down on the expense of going to India and China. Instead of going around the Cape of Good Hope, around Africa, it's going to cut off months. And it's just going to take a matter of weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, to get to Europe. This is a picture of Ahmad. He was a spiritual leader, believed to be equal to Muhammad in some circles. And now we're going to switch our attention to the Qing dynasty, the Manchus, who will come out of Manchuria. They were invited from time to time by the Ming dynasty to put down rebellions within their nation, and then after they were paid for their services, they were told to get out. Eventually, the Manchus will see that the Ming dynasty is not able to control the nation. They'll be invited in and never leave. They will adopt Chinese ways. They will keep the Confucius testing for bureaucrats. They pretty much leave things as they are, and they will adopt the Ming culture. They're going to have, again, an aversion to Westerners. Are going to try to keep them out, but eventually that they will fail. This will be the last dynasty in China. Now, you remember the Ming dynasty took over from the Mongols. And the reason the Ming Dynasty came to an end, again, was corruption and external pressures. Same old story. Uh, Peasants losing confidence in the government not taking care of business, uh, famines in the country. All of these things are going to weaken the Ming Dynasty. And eventually, this is going to be the same situation for the Qing Dynasty. Um, the Qing Dynasty ruled the empire that would become comparable to China's present day borders. This was the time when China extended its borders the furthest, and it looks pretty much the same as it is today in the 21st century. Um, but they will drive the Ming Dynasty from power. They had a pretty conservative approach to both economic and social reforms. Again, they will stress the hierarchy, ancestor respect, elderly respect, respect for the rulers in the nation. Women are confined to the household. Hang on. Okay, not here, someplace else. Yeah, they'd be fine. So they're going to take a pretty conservative approach to the way they rule. They did lower taxes. They did improve the working conditions of the peasants. Um, and this is going to work for a number of years. And they certainly are anti-Europeans. And they will embrace some of their ideas, but they never do modernize. And this is going to put them at a tremendous disadvantage, just as this will for the Islamic world. Rot within, well, these dynasties cycle through as governments come and governments go. There's going to be corruption in the government. People becoming bureaucrats will cheat by paying off the proctors, people administering the test. Again, food shortage and famine, disease will weaken the Qing dynasty or the Manchu dynasty. The Chinese under the Ming dynasty rejected foreigners, and the Qing dynasty will do the same. One of the things that will happen during the Qing dynasty or the Manchu dynasty is the Opium Wars. The British need a product that they can sell to the Chinese and correct the trade imbalance. If you remember, a lot of silver went to China. That's the only thing they were really interested in receiving from the Europeans. The Europeans, particularly the British, will start importing opium and make a number of people addicted to this drug, and it destroys the fabric of parts of China. Now, the government of China sees this as intolerable. They want to stop it. They go to the British and say, "You're importing opium here. Let's knock it off." Of course, the British government know nothing of this. They've turned their eye away from this. Having opium in Europe, in the British Empire, was illegal, but they're willing to look the other way in order to correct the trade imbalance. Eventually, a warehouse is burnt to the ground. The British asked for reparations or for the damages. And they said, well, what was in the warehouse? And they said, well, we had stuff in the warehouse. They never admit that they had opium. This is going to lead to armed conflict between the British and the Chinese government. And it's a one-sided fight, and the British will prevail. So war will break out in 1839, and the Chinese are easily defeated. As a result of their loss in the Opium Wars, the British are going to receive concessions from the Chinese government. One, they will receive the area of Hong Kong. They will also get an exemption from their people. If a law is broken or if something happens in China by a British subject, he is not to be tried in Chinese court. This is called extraterritoriality, where you get a concession, and other Europeans will eventually ask for the same consideration. Slowly but surely, China will be divided up into trading zones, spheres of influence by various European nations: Russia, Japan, the French, the British, the Germans will all have areas that they will control in China. Even though the Chinese government exists, they have to make concessions to the Europeans. This shows a picture of the Opium War. The British ships were far superior than the junk that were used by the Chinese. The Taiping Rebellion occurs. This is a challenge to the Manchu dynasty from within. Millions of people are going to be killed. Eventually, they will put this down, and the Manchu dynasty will continue. The Sino-Japanese War will break out in 1894 and last to 1895. And this will be a one-sided affair, and the Japanese will prevail, and the Chinese will lose territory, and they will have to grant trading privileges to the Japanese. Another rebellion that probably they will ask you on the exam is the Boxer Rebellion. This was an attempt by the Boxers. By the way, the Boxers were people who carry boxes, hence Boxers. So these were peasants, these were ordinary workers who wanted to drive out Christian missionaries and also the Europeans. This rebellion was secretly supported by the Hanchu government. Eventually the Boxers are destroyed, defeated by a coalition of European powers. They will force China to pay reparations, damages for the war, and more rights will be granted to Europeans. So this spells the end of them being really a sovereign nation. They do have an emperor or empress, but Europeans come to call the shots. 1912 is the last Manchu emperor. He will abdicate at the age of 6. And then it will go into civil war. The Japanese will attack in the 1930s. During World War II. After World War II, the nationalist government will fight the communist government, and the communists under Mao Zedong will take control of China. And today, China is becoming the most powerful nation in the world in terms of economic output, replacing the industrial output of the United States and Europe, becoming the real world power in the world. Remains to be seen how long this will last. So this is the conclusion of chapter 20.